And with that introductory theme music, I'd like to introduce Corneli van der Walt. I am always particularly interested in the people that came into logotherapy in midlife or after a certain point. And Dr. van der Walt actually started out as a chemical engineer and had became aware of psychological processes and started studying psychology on her own. And she was led to the work of Frankl. And so she self-studied and went into psychology and is qualified as a psychologist and studied under Theresa Chantal and has her coursework under Theresa. She's now in private practice, and she's also working at the Walt Institute of Technology as the manager of first-year experiences. And I think what's particularly valuable, speaking for myself, is the idea of an ultra short-term intervention with logotherapy. And there's much more behind that story, and I'm going to let her tell it to you now. Welcome.
I say thank you, Charles. Going to attempt to share my screen, then we can start off. I'm sure it's up. Let me just see that if I can pin this screen. Okay.
Looks good. Thank you.
Okay, there we are. I just want to see if I can get the screen removed.
We're seeing only your presenter screen. We don't see anything else, just to let you know.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like I don't have all the functions now. Let me see, it's also not moving.
You can use the left and right arrow keys to advance the slides if you want, as long as you're on the PowerPoint.
I'm on the PowerPoint, but it's not moving. I don't have the the same options now as when we've tested it. Let me just unshare and see if it helps. Oh, there we go now. It's a bit better. If I can unpin here, sorry, we will start now. Can't see. Okay, but let's start. Good evening, everyone. It's evening in South Africa. It's just before 7. So that is why my background is also so dark. But I'm sure you will be able to see me. So I'm Corneli van der Walt. I'm working at the Walt University of Technology in the Center for Academic Development. And I will be presenting on a research study that we've conducted in 2022. And the title of the presentation today, and I will mainly be sharing reflections on what transpired during the research study. So the title of the presentation is Reflections on an Ultra-Brief Logotherapy Intervention in a South African University Setting. So globally, higher education institutions are under pressure to take more central positions in their country's national development plans. And that is not different for South Africa. So basically, higher education institutions in South Africa has to take much more responsibility for social and economic development in the country. But South African higher education is carrying a double load because of the apartheid past in South Africa. So South African higher education also has a responsibility of helping with addressing the imbalances of the apartheid past. And we can then see in South Africa the increased demand for higher education in South Africa that is reflected in the growth in student enrollment, as well as a changed student profile. Osborne made us aware that we can't study meaning without considering individuals' context or life world and how it influenced their experience of meaning. So I've thought it well just to give you some insight into the context of the study. So as I've mentioned, the university is located in the south of Gauteng. Gauteng is considered as the economic hub in South Africa. Vanderbijlpark specifically is located in a highly industrialized area. So the university is surrounded by petrochemical and steel industries. More or less, the university has a total student population of 20,000, but as you've heard, my focus is on first-year students. And just to give you some idea, we currently have more or less 5,000 first-year students. We have 4 faculties in the university, Faculty of Applied and Computer Sciences, Engineering and Technology, Human Sciences, and then Management Sciences. And also in South Africa, student academic development initiative is highly dependent on external funding to get these programs realized. But yes, due to what is transpiring in South Africa, there's a lot of competition for and a decline in funding for academic development initiatives. A typical student at the Walt University of Technology come from a disadvantaged socioeconomic background. There's a high chance that they are the first generation in his or her family to attend the university. And we know from experience that a first generation student, they don't have family that have knowledge of university systems that can give them that support. And then also our students are high likely to have received poor primary and secondary schooling that didn't adequately prepare them for the demands of higher education. And our students, many of them are also significantly pressured to generate an income to support themselves while they are at university, but possibly also their extended families. Student peer mentoring is an established high-impact practice in higher education, especially towards promoting student success. And yeah, there's a high emphasis, obviously, in higher education on student success. So much of the work that we currently do, the phenomenon of student success surface very strongly. Peer mentoring specifically plays a key role in student adjustment to and integration with the university systems and university life, as well as the development of students or first-time entrants academic and personal skills. Specifically, your peer mentor is typically a senior student that has more experience in the university environment that then support these newcomers so that they can also be successful in their new community of higher learning. The peer mentoring program at the Walt University of Technology has a dual function to provide psychosocial support then for first-year students, but also providing academic support or career development. Prior to 2020, the reach of the peer mentor program was limited by its remuneration structure. We got more and more requests, especially for peer mentoring support, also in our higher risks programs, which are typically located in the Applied and Computer Sciences faculty, the Engineering and Technology, and then some of our management courses are higher risk courses. So we thought it well. We've done some planning. We had conversations to change the program to an incentivized program in 2020. The program is externally funded, so over a 3-year cycle. So the funding cycle came to an end towards 2020, and then we thought it well to manage change. We will then move the program to a volunteer program in 2021 when the new funding cycle started. And with these changes, we were able to move from appointing 58 peer mentors to 110 peer mentors. And with a ratio of 1 peer mentor to 20 mentees, there's quite a significant increase in the reach of the program. Just to give you some insight into our thinking about volunteering, and this is definitely a very simple view of volunteering, but we considered it as a form of helpfulness or service to others without receiving substantial financial compensation. And definitely when we think about volunteering, the values that comes to mind are humanitarian and altruistic values. That plays a role. Values are quite important in a logotherapy perspective. We argued then that in practice, the volunteer peer mentors would still benefit from opportunities to develop their knowledge, skills, and graduate attributes, develop their social networks, enhance their employability profiles, and experience meaning in giving service to others. On the other hand, the first-year students would benefit from an enhanced educational experience, and the university would then benefit from improved retention and success rates. But yes, life isn't going on a straight line. So there were unexpected events. And the COVID-19 pandemic arrived in South Africa in full force, beginning of 2020, and the country went into hard lockdown in April 2020. Also, what happened in the sector and all the institutional funding were reallocated to support the rapid migration to emergency remote teaching. Which also meant then that the peer mentors had to support the mentees through social media platforms. But our processes tend to be slow in higher education. I'm not sure if that is a global phenomenon, but definitely in South Africa and at my university. So what happened then at the time is, because of the slow processes, data to be able to access these platforms were not immediately available to our peer mentors, and they were already volunteering, or they were only incentivized at that stage. So it meant that the peer mentors had to use their own funds initially to buy data to be able to support the first-year students. And then obviously, because of the lockdown, the social and experiential parts of the program were severely disrupted. In practice, the combination of changes in the peer mentor program resulted in frustration for the peer mentors, which led to protest action and some bargaining. So they've approached us many a time, arguing with us, asking why are this happening? And it resulted in low morale and a higher than usual dropout from the program. We were under pressure, as I've mentioned, to meet the program goals and the set targets, because the program is externally funded and we are accountable to our funder. So we were under pressure to facilitate a more positive volunteer experience for our peer mentors, to make sure that we retain them in the program and that we could meet the program goals and targets. And then also on reflection, it come to mind that when we look at all these processes and what happened, especially in terms of the protest action, and that I say in inverted commas, because it wasn't full-blown protest action as we got to know it in South Africa, but all the low morale, the protest, the bargaining, it's a manifestation of an underlying loss and grief process. And at the time, yeah, the peer mentors were not ready to accept their new reality. Also, there are certain structural realities in higher education. I'm sure this is also maybe a global phenomenon and not specific to South Africa. But as a co-curricular structure, peer mentorship has a specific position, current, but also historic. So this is not new in the higher education system. Co-curricular programs are considered as add-ons, in inverted commas, sometimes luxuries, not so academic as the curriculum itself, and therefore positioned at the edge of the curriculum. So what we know from structural dynamics is that the closer individuals are to the curriculum in higher education, the more structurally enabled they are. And then the opposite is true. The further away individuals are from the curriculum, the more structurally constrained they are. And what it means in practice is basically, we know when we talk about structures, power and politics come into play. So these structural inequalities are evident in the remuneration structures that are not consistent for peer-to-peer support initiatives in the university. So the structural disposition of the program was perceived by some peer mentors as perpetuating inequalities, and therefore they perceived it and experienced it as unfair. So peer mentors definitely questioned and reconsidered their roles and positions in the institutional structure. This brings us to logotherapy, and I know that I'm in good company, and most of you will probably be more versed than I am in Viktor Frankl's logotherapy. So this is just a refresher, and then also focusing specifically on the principles that informed and supported the logotherapy intervention. We all know that logotherapy centers on three basic beliefs: freedom of will, will to meaning, and meaning in life. And then specifically, freedom of will is individuals' capacity to choose a stance or attitude under unfavorable conditions. Like what happened to the peer mentors. So individuals are each in their own context with their own experiences. And what is trivial for someone may be quite a stressful thing for someone else. And yeah, with freedom of will, we know individuals are called to responsibility, that they need to take responsibility for their choices and actions. If you prefer to stay on in the program, or if you prefer to drop out, and then your third preference can be is that you disengage, but you still stay in the program. Will to meaning, according to Frankl, is the most fundamental motivating force in people who strive for meaning fulfillment in life and work. We know that meaning fulfillment is unique and personal and can only be fulfilled by individuals. So no one else can fulfill someone else's meaning. But we also know, I think it's Dr. Wong made us also aware, and then Lance, that meaningful will to meaning has a dual character. So it's unique on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's also universal. So it is present in all civilizations, cultures, and under all circumstances. And all circumstances are unfavorable circumstances, but also circumstances of plenty, where someone can experience boredom. Meaning frustration is not uncommon. It's part of our human condition. And will to meaning become frustrated by life circumstances or internal hindrances. When individuals make decisions and not considering their values, they may experience frustration and even meaninglessness. Meaning in life is enabled by freedom of will and will to meaning. When individuals transcend situations or conditions to find meaning in their existence. Sometimes we think meaning in life is something spectacular, but it is not. It is contained in the daily here now experiences of individuals. Meaning, as we've heard now for the past 2 days, cannot be given or created. It needs to be discovered by a specific individual, detected or found. And then very important then for this ultra brief logotherapy is the concept of consciousness, which is the human capacity that enable individuals to find meaning in the moment. I'm not going to go in detail, but we all are familiar with the 3 ways that Frankl suggested individuals can find meaning or feel fulfilled as people. And that is giving to life through work and tasks, taking or receiving gifts from life through experiences like nature, art, music, and then also loving encounters with others. And then the third way to find meaning is that to take a specific stance or courageous attitude during unavoidable suffering. Meaning is experienced when values are realized through individual choice and when meaning potentials are fulfilled. This brings us to the logotherapy intervention. As I've mentioned, the intervention was part of the final stage of a bigger research project about volunteer peer mentors motivation in 2022. And then just also to mention, we have observed all ethical standards because humans were involved in this research project. And we've obtained the necessary ethical permissions to conduct the study. The aim of the study was specifically to strengthen the connections between the study participants who were the peer mentors who volunteered to participate in the study, actualized meaning in the moments. And the reason why we say it's actualized meaning in the moments, while we were busy with the research, as a logotherapist, I've realized that the students were so much focused on all the changes in the environment and the stipends and the salaries that they used to receive, that they've missed the meaning. They were just not aware of that. Yes, with an ultra brief logotherapy intervention, the intervention was of limited scope. It was a single session, self-contained session with a duration of more or less 60 minutes. And it was implemented in 2 small groups with 4 participants each. And then the Socratic dialogue was used to support the implementation of the brief intervention. Logotherapy, these are also then the principles that I want to highlight that specifically supported this intervention. Logotherapy is focused on existence in the specifically human spiritual dimension. And as I've mentioned, conscience is individuals' intuitive capacity to discover the meaning in the moment or of a situation. As we know, conscience stems from the unconscious. That is the home of the authentic self and the voice of meaning. And all what it means is that how things are in the unconscious may not be the same as what they seem to be in reality. And that is why we are working in this area. So through the Socratic dialogue, the content of the conscience is invited to reveal themselves and to speak through human experience. To receive the gift of meaning, individuals, in this case the peer mentors, need to accept and fulfill the challenges and tasks that life presents to them, irrespective of their circumstances. And yes, this relates now to the whole idea that what is in the unconscious may not be as it is in real, as it appears in reality, is that although individuals have choices and meaning potentials are present in any given situation, they may be dormant, so they are not that visible, they are hidden. So the Socratic dialogue, a very simple view of the Socratic dialogue, entails a series of open-ended questions that are specifically formulated to invite the authentic self to speak from the spiritual unconscious about what they intuitively know. So the task of the logotherapist by using Socratic questioning is to help individuals remember their accomplishments and meaning potentials that have been actualized. It's those dormant meaning in the moments that have been actualized. Also to help the individuals to strengthen the connections between their actualized meaning in the moments, and then to elicit the individual's wisdom within the spiritual dimension, or knowing of who they are, speaking about who they are and who is important or what is important and meaningful to them. And what I want to specifically add is that specifically in a small group setting, you have the benefit of the conscious, of the collective as well. Because while you are asking the Socratic questions, the other members contribute and also remind fellow participants of what have been accomplished. And in the, as it is in individual therapy, but also in the group setting, a small group setting, specifically, there's an opportunity to self-distance. And the moment when you start self-distancing and you see things more from the outside, you open up the channels for the voice to speak from within. Just some examples of Socratic questions within the context of this logotherapy intervention is: what inspired you in your role as a volunteer peer mentor? How did knowing that you were a volunteer impacted your participation in the program? And then what about your experience as a volunteer peer mentor help you to transform your annoyance, which is frustration, into acceptance? And then maybe just to mention, these are not predetermined questions. As therapists, we know that we listen deeply while we are working with our clients, those people that we encounter. And based on what we hear, we formulate these questions. So by using the Socratic dialogue in this brief session, the participants were invited to introspection and some further self-discovery. And it definitely raised awareness about individual choice, responsibility, and accountability. Further to that, basic counseling practices like reflection, comments, clarification, empathy, and focused interest on the participants were used to assist them to make new, as well as to strengthen existing meaning connections that enhance their meaning awareness. This brings us, I'm just going to reflect and share some of the outcomes of the intervention. And when I share it, obviously within the context, this is a brief intervention, so with many limitations. Most participants appear to have experienced their work with mentees, as well as their encounters with them, as meaningful and worthwhile. Likewise, most participants appear to have actualized meaning potential and values in the area, obviously, of the creative and experiential value domain. Just to give you some examples from the intervention, verbatim examples, one of the participants said, when someone succeeds academically and transitioning well into varsity, and they come back to me and they say they are sure that you really helped me. Another example of another participant is the person said, being part of the volunteering team, it gives me a natural sense of accomplishment. It also uplifts my spirit. I have a sense of pride and identity. And just to put this in context, no psychoeducation was done around logotherapy or logotherapy terms or what it is about. So the language naturally came to the fore, which tells me that the voice really came through from the spiritual dimension. But yes, on the other hand, some participants were motivated by material things. One of the participants openly said, and give us a little bit more material things. Material things can help us to become more motivated. Another participant said that that motivated me most to apply is the stipend, because I've started back then when we were receiving a stipend each semester, and that gave me motivation. I knew that when I went to class to meet with my students, I need to motivate them. Make sure that you get that 60-something% so that you be part of the mentorship program. We're getting paid openly. And then in the same realm, some participants appeared to have experienced meaning frustration in relation to loss of finance, normative tensions, and a loss of role status. The example here speaks to meaning frustration in the context of normative tension, where the participants specifically said friends and cousins at other universities, and they are getting stipends and all of those things. So they are no longer into volunteering. It is very concerning. Then just to give you some context for the loss of role status, more than one participant mentioned during the intervention that when they approach some of the lecturing staff to make the necessary connections and build the relationships with the first year students, because the program functioned from a basis of learning communities for the first year students. So the peer mentors are responsible to set that up. The lecturers, some of the lecturers responded to them that they don't acknowledge their role as a peer mentor and they are just students. So that was in a way devaluating the role of a peer mentor. Then what comes to mind on reflection is that not only our students, but we live in an age of consumerism and consumption. And this is something that has moved into higher education. Well, definitely in South Africa. I'm sure it's not different globally. So yes, staff are rushing in to fill that inner void that came to mind on reflection. However, some participants have exercised their freedom by choosing to continue volunteering despite their environmental limitations, devaluing encounters with lecturers. There was also a huge sense in that regard that the bigger environment, the university environment, don't acknowledge them, as well as how they will acknowledge other peer-to-peer initiatives. And also they choose not to drop out as some of their fellow peer mentors from the program. So this quote from one of the participants just summarizes it very beautifully. You are joining the program because you want to. If you feel like it's being too much, you won't be denied the opportunity to leave the program, of which they, the fellow peer mentors, have. I feel like, no, I cannot do this anymore because the program is not meeting my expectation. You can simply leave the program, but they choose not to leave the program and to persevere. And obviously, what comes to mind is Dr. Frankl that's saying those who have a reason, they can continue or persevere under difficult circumstances. What was obviously during this intervention and what transpired there is that the participants who helped their mentees during challenging times was definitely a striking manifestation of self-transcendence. Just to quote one of them, it's the mentees, regardless of whether we get paid or not, they still require our help. They still need to be helped to transition well into varsity. And obviously, when we talk about transition, we're talking about the whole first year before they transition into their second year. So it has some duration. It's not just at the beginning of the year for a brief period. And then, this just reminds us that the participants transcended by rising above themselves, regardless their unfavorable conditions, that they forgot about the self rather than being centered on the self. So during what I've witnessed as the logotherapist in the session, which I really enjoyed and was heartwarming for me, is that some of the participants could refocus from meaning frustration or a meaning focus to a sense of meaning, or realizing that awareness that meaning in the moment indeed did happen. So also just to give you an example, it come by your expectation of having to get a stipend or some monetary compensation, but not getting it brought me to a point of acceptance where you now have developed full passion for what you are doing. Another participant said, I had a kind of expectation in terms of finances because my previous mentors told us, right, there is a certain money. Yeah, so that was one of the reasons I did that. But I really fell in love with it while I was in it. And also, I think Pin and colleagues summarize it so well when they say that in the inspired world, value manifests itself as a feeling of passion, which spontaneously comes from within. The inspired actions are motivated by a desire to create, and certainly not by money. But yes, we say it in a context that we are all aware that, yes, we need money to survive, but that is definitely not the meaning. So just some concluding thoughts after reflecting about what transpired during the intervention. A key outcome for higher education students is the development of purpose and meaning in life. So that is a key task, basically, for students while they are in higher education. Higher education is not only about academic development, it's about holistic student development. That definitely includes the development of the spiritual dimension of students. What I've realized after this research study is that the peer mentor program's broader environment upheld motivation as a surrogate for the search for meaning. And clearly the concept of a search for meaning is neglected in higher education, then more specifically in the context of volunteer peer mentoring at the Walt University of Technology. There is then a strong need for student development practitioners to draw from the ideas of Dr. Frankl to help students to come to an enhanced understanding of what work and its meaning could be about. And yes, that work is more than the salary or the incentives that you get at the end of the day, because they are much more embedded in work than that. And in a bigger picture and thinking about students' future, a sense of meaning in work and life may enable peer mentors to achieve their career and life goals, despite the reality of being a volunteer and effectively reproducing structural inequalities. And that is definitely through the lens of a market perspective that has infiltrated higher education. And yeah, it's the contextual given. But I think our task then as student development practitioners is definitely to guide our students in the search for meaning. Yes, so thank you for attending. That is the end.
Thank you so much. I'm wondering if there are any questions. We have just a couple minutes left, but we can take some questions. Don't make me play the Jeopardy theme again.
I have a question.
I have a question. If you had to do it all over again, would you start with money or would you start without money?
You, definitely, if it's under my control, I will definitely do it without money. But I'm also hesitant when I say that, because I had a change in perspective while we've done the volunteer, the motivation study. So what I've realized is that when we're talking about volunteering, it's rarely purely altruistic. There's always benefits. So yeah, so students need to live at the end of the day, but it should not be the focus and robbing them of the true sense of meaning.
Okay, thank you.
Teresa is next. She had her hand up.
Yes, thank you so much. I was I think this is more of this work needs to be done, especially in a university setting. So thank you. My question is, have you thought about a sort of qualitative research? Because I think this can be very well translated in, because identifying themes that are such importance and perseverance, you brought one of them, but this can be is a beautiful study. So thank you. And I thought whether sort of this step is in the plan, because it is a beauty, it's a wonderful, so needed work, and just wonder what the next plan would be.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, we're starting a new cycle of this whole volunteer program next year. And obviously, we are responsible as the center for the training of the peer mentors. And there's a series of trainings speaking to specific skills areas. And I was thinking of introducing logotherapy principles in that. I've previously conducted a study as well, a quantitative study, with students who were enrolled for at-risk students. To determine relationships between their mental health, their academic performance, and their meaning in life. And we've then used specific questionnaires. So it is quite, or it's meaning questionnaires. And it's quite possible to do an intervention with the peer mentors, but that you do a quantitative study and you do a pre and a post test. And I was also thinking it should be very important, because with an ultra brief intervention, it's not really possible to determine the effect size. But if we do a quantitative study, we can do a better planning and then not only determine effect size or impact, say 3 weeks after the intervention was concluded, but maybe in a longer term. And yeah, it would even be possible to do a follow-up if the students stay in the process and they move into postgraduate studies, also to determine where we find them in terms of their search for meaning. But we must remember that students are in a phase, they don't have clear meaning. They are searching, but we can equip them at least with that search.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. And I'm sure your discussion will continue on in our lunch discussion groups. And I hope perhaps you can join one of those. And I hope we can be helpful in your work, but also learn more from you as you proceed with it. And so thank you very much.
I say thank you very much.